Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 150. It's a bit of a monumental one for our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we're going to be having a look at a very interesting assortment. Got a couple marsupials, a couple ungulates, a few birds, and even a reptile that we'll be starting off with. So our first animal is the plumed basilisk, also known as the Jesus Christ lizard or the green basilisk, by Tosco DS. So really excited to get stuck in this one. So let's have a look at one of these little guys. Just gotta find him. There we are. That must be the baby. Let's find the adult. Juvenile is the adults. Oh, look at you. That's the one we want to have a look at. Really interesting male. So these guys are a species of lizard in the family Corythophanidae and are native to South America. So in terms of these guys' habitat, these guys are typically restricted to rainforests near running streams, such that occur in southern Mexico and northern Colombia, like moist lowland or wet mature forests with running streams are their kind of preferred habitat. And the habitat is typically hot and humid, with agroforestry systems being necessary to preserve these guys. And while they are native to southern Mexico and northern Colombian rainforests, there is evidence to suggest they occupy land in the Atlantic Vacant as well, so may be found around Panama and Honduras, which is interesting, and even been found in the Pacific coast near Costa Rica. So their range might be a little bit bigger than what we expected. So these guys are arboreal, so they prefer the tree landscape and are active during the day or diurnal. And out of the three species of these guys present in Costa Rica, each of these ones are found in both Bersants or borders of land. They're also aquatic lizards, so they're quite found in high prevalence in Central American inland rivers, streams, and ponds, along with lakes and seesaws and things like that. And they're quite unique for being both arboreal and aquatic, and can be found in large numbers both in trees or perched on boulders near water, so they quite like those kind of areas. So in terms of the name, the basilisk comes from the legendary reptilian creature from European mythology that could kill you with a glance, things like that, which is quite interesting. And they also get their nickname, the Jesus Christ lizard, from the ability to walk on water, which we'll get into. So in terms of their description, they are the largest basilisk species with an average snout to vent length, so from their snout to their vent, of about 10 inches or 25 centimeters, but including the tail, they can get to about 3 feet or 91 centimeters long. As you can see, these adults are quite brilliant green with bright yellow eyes and small bluish spots along their dorsal ridge. And you can see the males here kind of have 3 crests, so they have one on their head, one on their back, and one on their tail, while females just have the head crest, which is quite interesting. And juveniles are typically a little bit less conspicuously coloured, and you lack the head crest. So you can see this is a young adult, this is a female, and you can see the juveniles are probably a little bit more basic. As you can see that they only have the head crest. That's a good way to tell them apart. We'll have a look at the female now. Really, really cool. Anyway, so these guys are a bright green lizard. You can see there's various streaks of white, grey, and markings along their body. However, there's some alternative forms or subspecies that seems to have only black markings, things like that. It's kind of who you ask. And the underbelly you can see is typically a lighter shade and green, and then the bright green is shown pretty much throughout their body. They also have the openings that are slightly larger than the size of their eyes over here. That's where their ears are. They have small glandular scales comprising the main part of their skin. And you can see they've also got a quite triangular head with round eyes and round pupils to be able to better see. You can see the males have the 4 prominent crests, as they have the kind of the little one there and the big one. You kind of saw it before. That's the kind of the most prominent crest. But yeah, really, really cool. And these features form the greatest physical distinction between females and males. And as I mentioned, the babies are most reduced ones, which is quite interesting. So really, really cool. I'll have a look back at the males to talk about the crests. Where is he? He's kind of the hardest to find, I guess. There he is. So you can see it's got kind of the little one there. There we are. See the little one, big one, body, and then tail. So you can see there's kind of 4 crests going on there. In terms of predators, these guys are often preyed upon by birds of prey, opossums, coatis, and snakes, and that's where their ability to run on water kind of really helps with them surviving. So, in terms of their behavior, these guys are territorial. So, a single male may defend a territory with several females that he mates with, and they do not actually tolerate much handling in captivity. So, being able to run on water, they're able to run short distances across the water using both their feet and tail for support, which is an ability also shared with the Malayan sail-finned lizard. And when running, they create an air cavity which they use to push themselves from their feet, and this is mostly seen in adult lizards. The adults have a greater mass of juveniles, so are less hydrodynamic, and they are able to run across the water to escape predators. And that's where they get their name, the Jesus Christ lizards. But they're also excellent swimmers and can hold their breath, stay underwater for over an hour. And most distinct are these guys' ability to run on water, so they typically employ this behavior when they try to get away from a threat, so like an animal's attacking them. And it's when they run bipedally, so they'll run on their back legs and just shoot across the water and use both their feet and shank for immersion to the water as well. And other species do use this threat response as well because it's advantageous because they're able to run faster on the water and allows them to escape both land and water predators. So on land, they can escape, they could dart into the water to get away from like an opossum or a coati or something. But on the water, they can get up and then run away from like a crocodile or a large fish or something like that. The speed that they're able to run and navigate the waters typically defined or determined largely by the highland elongation potential. So the longer the lead, they're typically able to kind of move around as well. In addition, these guys have the surface area of the lizard's foot that really allows them to get speed. So they have their greater surface area on their foot that allows them to run across water. And typically they can run across the water at about a speed of 2.14 meters per second or 7 feet a second. And the lesser speeds for juveniles. And while other species do kind of use this behavior, it has been shown that these guys are the most preferred lizard species for water running and typically less hesitant to use the skill. So this is the most common one that uses it. It's kind of big thing. So they're quite notable in that ability because they use it to avoid predation, and while some insects are able to do the same thing, these guys achieve this through fluid dynamics, but these guys kind of create an air-filled cavity and then retract it in their legs when they close it, so able to pretty much like walk on the air, which is quite interesting, a very interesting ability for a lizard to have, and it seems to work out quite well. They're obviously doing quite well on their habitat. So yeah, let's talk about now their reproduction. So during a week prior to laying, sexually mature females of the basilisks, plumed basilisk, are observed presenting themselves to the males. So position herself about a foot away from the male, lower her forehead to the sand and raise her pelvic region and tail. And then once they mate, they can produce up to between 5 and 15 eggs at the time. And then they kind of lay them in warm, damp sand or soil. The one in captivity is actually observed digging holes for nests in the soil 6 months prior to laying, well ahead of the breeding season. The eggs hatch after about 8 to 10 weeks, and at the point they emerge, they are fully independent lizards, averaging only about 1.7 inches or 43 millimeters in snout to vent length and weighing about 2 grams. And the juvenile males would start to develop their large crests, their characteristic after 6 months and more than 1 year, depending on the conditions of the juveniles. And typically females start showing or being visibly plump about 1 to 2 weeks after post-fertilization. And during the 3rd week, they will actually search for a site for their burrow. And typically the size and quantity of the eggs depends on their life cycle and physical characteristics such as age and health and size. And also quite common for them to lay multiple clutches in a season, and this event can occur 4 to 5 times during a given breeding season. And typically hatching of the eggs will occur over a 1 to 2 day period after gestation and incubation period of about 8 to 10 weeks. So that's kind of what's covered there. So let's see, you can see, is this a juvenile or a baby? We'll have a look at the juveniles. Let's find the female. There we are. So in terms of their diet, these guys are omnivores, so their diet is inclusive of both meat and vegetables, but they'll eat quite a large variety of insects and worms, but they'll also feed on fruits, seeds, flowers, and leaves as well. They'll often even hunt smaller sized animals such as small mammals like rodents, fish, vertebrates, small birds, small non-venomous snakes, small lizard species and amphibians, also lots of crustaceans like shrimps and crayfish and even spiders. They do not often found in search of insects of their diet, so they're kind of more smaller animals, but they just eat whatever they can, really. They typically consume like brown crickets, black crickets, and locusts. And though in captivity, they can be fed waxworms, cockroaches, mealworms, beetleworms, things like that. So they seem to do quite well and eat a lot of those species in that regard. So do quite well. But yeah, really, really cool. Love to see the Jesus Christ lizard, or the really cool basilisk. Definitely a big fan of these guys. Done by Tosco DS, so really interesting one. Kind of sad that it doesn't actually do the running animation, and this is kind of like a half pie release according to Tosco. So once things like custom animations and things come around, this guy will probably have another update to really bring him around. So that'll be quite cool to see. Definitely excited to see that. So next up, we've got another Great Cakes mod. I know everyone loves Great Cakes mod, but we've got a lot from Great Cakes today. So we can have a look here. This is the white-breasted waterhen, or the common white-breasted waterhen. So these guys are a water bird in the rail and crake family, Railidae, and is quite widely found across South and Southeastern Asia. You can see they're dark birds. You can see that there. They adults have mainly dark grey underparts and flanks, with a bright lower belly that are white or cinnamon coloured, especially on the back cinnamon. There's more cinnamon around the back. Their body, as you can see, is flattened laterally to allow them to pass through reeds and undergrowth quite easily. They also have quite long toes and a short tail and yellow bill, and these big toes allow them to walk across all sorts of lily pads and things, allows them to be less surface tension, quite cool things. And sexes are quite similar, but the females are slightly smaller, and immature birds are typically much paler, and with the downy chicks, they're completely black, like a lot of other rails. There have been lots of different subspecies described because they're quite widely distributed. They're found across India, southern China, a lot of Indonesia, places like that. And the nominate subspecies is described from Sri Lanka and is often widened to include the Malin subspecies as well, but it kind of is like subspecies, they're all under the same thing. So in terms of their distribution and habitat, these guys typically are found in marshes across tropical Asia from Pakistan into Indonesia. They can be seen on plains as far as the Natal Hills and High Range of Kelar. And these large, about 32 centimeters or 13-inch long rails are the permanent residents throughout this range. They also make short distance migrations and will migrate to new areas and colonize them. They've also been noted to be some of the early colonizers of the volcanic island of Rakatawa, I believe you say that. And while they're most often found near fresh water, they can be found around seashores and brackish water when there's no fresh water, like on the volcanic barren island as well. So in terms of their ecology, they're usually seen singly or in pairs as they forage slowly along the edge of water bodies, mainly on the ground, but sometimes in low vegetation. Their tail is held up and jerked as they walk, and they probe with their bill in muddy water or mud or shallow water, allowing them to pick up food. In terms of their diet, they mainly eat insects or large numbers of beetles, but also small fish, aquatic vertebrates, or seeds, pretty much anything small enough. And they may sometimes actually feed in deeper water, very similar to moorhens. That's how they'll kind of feed, which is quite interesting. The nesting season for these guys, we'll have a look at these cute little babies as we talk about them. The cute little baby rails, all black and real cute. So the nesting season for these guys is mainly between June to October, but it varies locally. They nest in a dry location around the ground in marshes and things like that. They lay typically 6 to 7 eggs. Courtship typically evokes bowing and billing and nibbling, and then after they've mated the eggs, after they've been laid, they'll hatch after about 19 days, with both sexes incubating and taking care of the chicks. And chicks will actually often dive underwater to escape predation, and adults are said to build a roost or brood nest where young chicks and the adults are roost, which is quite cool. But many rails typically are quite secretive. I've worked with a few different species of rails, so they are quite secretive. But white-breasted warhens are often seen out in the open, and they can be noisy, especially during the dark, with loud croaky calls. And some actually make duck-like quack calls, which is quite interesting. So on culture, most of their names and culture is typically just from onomatopoeic sounds. So typically just sound like how the sound they make, which is quite interesting. So yeah, really, really cool animals. So you not love this hen. The common white-breasted swamp hen, really, really interesting rail. I love seeing them. So cool to see more birds. This is also a personal project. This wasn't a commission for Great Cakes Mod, so it's really cool to see some interesting species that a lot of people would probably not pay for. I just like seeing variety. Variety is the spice of life. We all know that. So that's a Great Cakes Mod. Next up, we're moving to another really cool little animal. We're moving on to some marsupials from Australia. This is also done by Great Cakes Mod. We've got the Rufous betong, or the Rufous rat kangaroo. I prefer betong, to be honest. These guys are a small, jumping rat-like marsupial that are native to eastern Australia and the only species in the genus Apatoprimus. They're also the largest member of the potero betong family and about the size of a rabbit. So in terms of their taxonomy, these guys are only a member of the genus and also the largest. They generally get their name because they have the reddish-brown humpback on their back there, so that's where they get the name Rufous, kind of red colour. But they were once thought as solitary nocturnal animals, but these guys actually formed loose polygamous associations, which is quite interesting. But also feed a lot on tubers and fungi, but also a lot of fruits and vegetation. So as a species of these guys, they're a medium-sized marsupial that include the living potus and betongs, but they're not closely related to either of them and are the biggest, so their own genus. They can typically be told apart by the ruffled and bristly hair of their pelt, and the rufous tint on the upper parts where they get their name. There's also a stripe that comes along the hip line sometimes. As you can kind of see, there's a little bit of a stripe going on there. In terms of their upper sides, also grey but paler. Their combined head to body length was between 38 to 39 centimeters, and then their tail itself adds when 24 to 39 centimeters. That is also, when expecting, they usually have a white tip to the end of their tail, which is while their color is overall like a grey brown. The colors of the ears you can see are very dark, but they're quite pink in the interior, and they're fringed with silver hairs, probably for protection. They also have a hairless pink rim across their eye, and typically the weight range for the species is between 2.5 to 3.5 kilograms. And they may get views for the northern betong, but they're distinguished by like the lack of shaggy fur, their blackish tail, and the species obviously being a little bit smaller. One of the really interesting vocalizations with these guys as well is also they have a soft hissing sound that they make, like an alarm call. It almost sounds like a chainsaw when it's aggressive and emits a grunting noise during normal activity. So let's find one of the cute little babies and talk about, reproduction. There's got to be one over here. Look at this little cutie. Definitely is real cute. So in terms of their breeding, these guys occur throughout the year, but once the females reach maturity, typically about 11 months, the males will reach maturity themselves at about 12 to 13 months, so it takes a little bit longer for males to get mature. Once mature though, the female is actually capable of breeding at 3-week intervals, and the gestation of the young typically lasts for 20 to 24 days, and after the young is born, they live inside the pouch for another about 16 weeks, and then upon leaving the pouch, the joey will stay next to its mother for about 7 weeks, while it gets used to fending for itself. So that's how they kind of reproduce. In terms of their other behaviors, though, these guys may share nests or be solitary, with a male cohabiting with potentially 1 or 2 females. Their nests are typically located in dense understory vegetation, when there's sort of shallow clearing made with woven plant material. And the forage activity is strictly nocturnal, and they will only emerge after sunset and return to the nest at first light. And the posture varies within the species, so they often assume a highlight posture to serve their surroundings. They will draw their forelimbs to their chest when hopping, and then resting and slowly moving like that, kind of like kangaroos chewing when they move around. Typically, their favourite foods are subterranean fruiting bodies of fungi and tubers, as they have quite strong claws that allow them to excavate them and dig them out. But other foods they'll eat is insect larvae, sedges, plants, grasses, and things like that. And even eats bits of bread and like things like that. That's very interesting as well. When people leave them out, there's been reports of them eating a bread, which is quite interesting. So in terms of their habitat, these guys are a little bit northern Australia. They're typically found in the coastal and subcoastal regions of Newcastle in New South Wales to Cooktown in Queensland, and was formerly found along the Murray River Valley in New South Wales and Victoria. So they have been extinct in some part of their range, which is very, very sad, but they are still considered least concern, which is quite good. Lots of conservation efforts to kind of help related species, so luckily they're doing okay. Really, really cute. So we got another little marsupial done by Great Cakes Mod. We have got one that looks a little bit silly. We've got the long-nosed potero, another really cool one. He's got the long face. So these guys, the long-nosed potero, are a small hopping marsupial that are native to the forests and scrublands of southeastern Australia and also found in Tasmania. So they are a member of the potu family, and they typically live alone and dig around at night for fruit, fungi, roots, and small insects. And like other marsupials, they do carry their young in a pouch. But they are sadly considered near threatened because of habitat loss and introduced species like cats and foxes. And there are two different subspecies. There's one found in mainland Australia and one that's in Tasmania with lighter fur. But at first glance, you can see these guys look very much like a bandicoot, but they're actually more closely related to kangaroos. And they exhibit many interesting features such as a elongated nose, erect ears, large eyes, and big claws for digging that allows them to, survive. And they're actually quite small. They typically reach body lengths of about 34 to 38 centimeters or 13 to 15 inches and have a semi-prehensile tail or able to use it to grab onto things that's between 15 to 24 centimeters or about 5 to 9 inches. And although these guys are rarely seen in the wild, they're better indications of the presence of the runways that they make through the undergrowth looking for roots and fungus, which is quite interesting. So these guys were first noted in 1790 by John White, who recorded them in Botany Bay, and their former description was like the kangaroo rat or the potero, which is very interesting. And these guys are kind of been inside of the genus Potterus, with other species as well, such as the the broad-faced potero, the long-footed potero, and the Gilbert's potero. Sadly, the broad-faced potero is extinct. In terms of its habitats, these guys live in a variety of small microhabitats along the southern highlands of New South Wales, as well as southwestern Victoria, and as well as Tasmania. But their bones have been found in a number of cave deposits, indicating that they were much more widespread than they are today. And these species typically prefers ranges of vegetation types, from subtropical to temperate warm forests, using tall open forests with dense understories, and also dense coastal heaths as well. The main requirement is thick ground cover, which is needed for nesting material, but also protection from predators. They also prefer light soils that are easy to dig for them, so they can get to the tubers and fungi that they like to eat. Typically, their home range is varies a lot. The largest recorded range was about 85 acres or 3.34 hectares, but sometimes it can range from about 5 to 20 hectares or 12 to 49 acres, depending, with males typically having much larger ranges than females, since they often will have multiple females within their range. In terms of their life history, these guys are typically solitary and only been observed together with mating or when with young. There have been reports of several males and females in loose aggregations, but these guys are non-territorial and just have large home ranges, and the over ranges of the males usually encompasses the range of many female that allows them access to the females year-round. However, breeding usually occurs in late winter to early summer, and females are polyestrous and can have 2 reproductive seasons per year. So in terms of how they spend their days, these guys are nocturnal. They spend most of their time within the shelter of the undergrowth, and they use their long curved claws to kind of dig up food. And they are omnivores, so they typically find all sorts of fungi, roots, flowers, seeds, insects, and larvae, with fungi being actually quite important for their diet, with about 50 species consumed within for potus, depending on their, seasonal variation or what's most common during the time. But during the fall and winter, they primarily will eat these fungi and seeds, but in the spring and summer months, they'll eat a lot more plant tissues, fish, fruits, flowers, and arthropods to kind of get a little bit more protein. In terms of these guys, they sniff their ground in like a side-to-side motion with their long nose, and once they've located a possible food source, they'll actually start to dig it with their paws. And actually, they're quite important for the spreading of fungus. Because they eat the fungus, they'll often get rid of their paws in their droppings, and some of these fungi will grow in the roots of native plants and assist the plants to the uptake of nutrients in the soil. So they're a really important animal for the ecosystems that they live in, which is really interesting. So let's have a look. Let's have a look for a baby. Have a look at the cute little baby, little guy, little goober. So these guys were actually one of the first marsupials to be described by European settlers, although they have been threatened by a lot of habitat change that we have done. So they're threatened by wild dogs, feral cats, red foxes, human settlement, livestock raising, habitat degradation, and inappropriate fire regimes, which has really affected them a lot. The pattern of burning along habitat has changed, which has become much more severe, which affects the understory that they need to make their, obviously, their nesting and protection. So that affects the potero, since their fire regimes are typically much more severe and more frequent. That gets rid of that understory that they need. And they are considered as near threatened, so they are protected. And past conservation efforts to protect these guys as putting them under and trying to create reserves for them to live in. But there's like a national survey trying to figure out how many there are in progress. But there's lots of ways that have been suggested to help populations, like controlling foxes, controlling weeds, preventing disease spread, or restricting livestock in their habitat. All sorts of things, researching like population size and stuff like that. There's lots of monitoring that needs to go to better understand their populations, but luckily they aren't doing too bad. Just some little things I think that could help them would be really important for their populations. But yeah, really, really cute, aren't they? How can you not love these guys? Love those potus. So next up, we're going to have a look at a mod done by Leaf and Nick. They've done a little remaster of an older mod. We've got here the Clip Springer, a really, really awesome animal. So let's have a look at these guys. So clip springers, or Oreotragus, these guys are a small antelope typically found around eastern and southern Africa. So they actually were the sole member of their family described by Earnhardt August Wilhelm von Zimmermann in 1783. So in terms of their taxonomy as well, their name just means mountain he-goat, pretty much, and they're in their own group within the Bovidae. And their common name, klipspringer, comes from the Afrikaans word klip, rock, and springer, leaper, so basically just means the rock leaper. And there has been some research into their genetics, and they suggest there may be 11 subspecies that could have been species. But it's kind of, the methods they use is very controversial, and there actually is evidence potentially that there could be 2 to 3 different species of klipspringer within klipspringers themselves. So I really hope someone gets into study that, because there could actually be a couple of species of klipspringers considering the variation. But yeah, these guys are quite a small, sturdy antelope. They typically reach between 43 to 60 centimeters, or about 17 to 23 inches tall, and their head to body length is typically between 75 to 115 centimeters, or about 30 to 45 inches. Typical weights for these guys as well is between 8 to 18 kilograms, or 18 to 40 pounds, and they are sexually dimorphic, with females being slightly larger and heavier than males. And prominent features you can see is their brown foreheads. They've got quite short ears, prominent preorbital glands, as you kind of see going on there, and white lips and chin. And the horns are short and spiky, typically only present on males, and typically measure between 7.5 to 9 centimeters, with a maximum record horn of about 15 centimeters. Let's see, is this a male? Oh, this is a female, so that must be like a little thing that's wrong. Only the females don't have horns. The coat of the klipspringer, as you can see here, is often like yellowish grey to reddish brown, which acts as quite good camouflage in its rocky habitat. But unlike most other antelopes as well, they have a thick and coarse coat with hollow bristle hairs, and their incisors actually might get damaged by their hairs while grooming. So typically these coats is actually a really great adaptation to save animals during steep falls, and actually helps with insulation in their extreme mountain habitats. And a study shows that actually ticks occur mostly on the underbelly, where the coat is less coarse, so that's really interesting as well. And often will make these hairs erect if the animal is ill or if the temperature increases. And then another interesting feature that these guys have is a very interesting gait. So they walk on the tips of their hooves. You can see they've got very cylindrical, blunt hooves, and this allows them to grip better on and jump over rocky surfaces much better. So in terms of their ecology and behavior, these guys are nocturnal, typically only active mainly at night, where they rest during the midday and late night. And the animals tend to be more active in moonlit nights, where they bask themselves in the morning sunlight to warm themselves. And as gregarious or social animals, the klipspringer, like diptychs and orbi, are actually exhibit monogamy much greater extent to other antelopes, with individuals of opposite sex forming pairs until it might last until one dies. And the males will tend to stay close, like as in within 5 meters of each other at one time. For instance, one will take a look out while one's feeding, and then they'll hop a few meters away from danger when they need to. Other social groups that they have are small family groups of up to 8 or more members of solitary individuals. They'll often greet each other by rubbing their cheeks together, considering they've got those preorbital glands. It might be a way of communication. So let's see if we can find the male. Where's the male at? That's in the female. So you must be the male. So males will typically form territories between 7.5 to 49 hectares, or between 18 to 121 acres, depending on rainfall patterns, where they'll stay with their partners and their offspring. Males are generally much more vigilant than females, and then they'll also make large dung heaps to mark their territories. That can be up to about a meter length and about 10 centimeters deep around these borders to kind of mark them. And also use the preorbital gland and rub them onto vegetation to kind of mark their territories. There's also been studies that a tick has actually detects these aggregations marked by klipspringers and use them. And other studies show that plants at the borders are particularly preferred for marking, so it's quite interesting. Also, as well, these guys prefer plants for marking, and they have vocalizations such as like a shrill whistle that not only bring out the pair in duet, but it's actually means of communication or anti-predator responses. But sadly, these guys do have a lot of predators out there in the ecosystem. They can be preyed upon by baboons, jackals, caracals, crowned eagles, leopards, other eagles like crowned and martel eagles, servals, Venerex eagles, and spotted hyenas. But birds such as familiar chats, starlings, yellow burbles have often been seen feeding on the parasites that these guys get on their skin. So there's some positive there. In terms of their diet, though, these guys are primarily browsers, so they typically feed on young plants, fruits, and flowers, with grasses eaten mainly during the wet season, forming a minor portion of their diet. Though some plants are seasonally preferred, and they mainly depend on succulent plants or not water bodies to meet their water requirements. So they can also stand on their hind legs and actually reach branches up to 1.2 meters, or about 3 feet tall, and some have even been seen climbing trees up to about 5 meters, or about 17 feet tall. So let's have a look at these cute little babies while we talk about, why not? So in terms of reproduction, these guys are seasonal breeders. So when the time that the mating occurred varies a lot depending on where you are in Africa, and the females will become sexually mature about the time that they're about a year old, with males taking slightly longer to mature than the females. Mating behaviours have not been extensively observed, and gestation will typically last about 6 months, following which a single calf that weighs slightly more than a kilogram is born, and births peak from spring to early summer, typically, and then births will take place in dense vegetation, with the newborn being heavily hidden by the mother for about 3 months to protect it from predators, with the mother returning to suckle it about 3 to 4 times a day, and these visits will gradually lengthen as the offspring gets bigger, and the males will also protect the offspring and keep a watch for other males and predators, and then typically the calf is weaned after about 4 to 5 months, and they leave their mother when they turn about a year old. And klipspringers are quite long-lived, actually. They live for about 15 years, considering how big they are. Really, really cool little guys. Love the little klipspringers. In terms of their habitat distribution, they do love rocky terrain with sparse vegetation. Typically lowlands, or they'll migrate down to high density. They've been found as altitudes as high as 15,000 feet on Kilimanjaro, and they often will prefer like highland habitats up to 10 to 14 individuals per square kilometer in Ethiopia. However, their habitat is typically rocky over long stretches of grassy terrain and things like that. They can have quite low densities. The antelopes occur in significant numbers around eastern and southern Africa, around like Sudan, Irina, and Ethiopia. Also can be found around the Congo and things like that in Nigeria, but they're actually feared to be extinct in Burundi. Luckily, they are considered least concern though, so there's not really many threats to their extinction though. They are hunted for their meat, leather, and hide. However, other than that, there's no major threats because typically the habitats that they live in are inaccessible, unfavorable for hunting. And although they do not frequent mountain areas much, however, the populations at lower altitudes are typically more vulnerable, but more highland populations as well do well because they don't have to compete with livestock, but lower populations do have to deal with that. But luckily, they are considered protected. A lot of areas, but about 25% of their populations are protected, so they are doing okay and probably will do okay for the near future. So that's really, really cool. So yeah, that's the Klipspringer done by Leaf and Nick, another like remaster. The only thing that's probably wrong is the females having horns, but other than that, looks pretty spot on. Definitely a big fan of a nice Klipspringer. So next up, we've got actually a new modder on the scene. We've got Ricky Ice, which is quite cool. We got the Chamois. So look at this wonderful guy. So this is the Alpine Chamois. So Ricky Ice did a great job with this guy. So the chamois, or rubicapra, or the Alpine chamois, is a species of goat antelope that is native to southern Europe, so like the Pyrenees, the Alps, places like that, even Turkey and the Caucasus, but have been introduced to the South Island of New Zealand. So there's a few different subspecies, of course, and there's the Pyrenean one that's a different subspecies. But yeah, these guys are very interesting. They're a very small bovid, so they're fully grown. They reach about 70 to 80 centimeters at the shoulder, and 28 to 31 inches, and measure about 107 to 137 centimeters, or 42 to 54 inches in height. Males will typically weigh between 30 to 60 kilograms, or 66 to 132 pounds. With slightly larger than females, typically weigh between 25 to 45 kilograms, or about 55 to 99 pounds. So this is a female. I'm pretty sure this is a female. Yep. As you can find the male. We'll have a look at you. Okay, so both males and females, as you can see, have kind of these short, straightish horns that kind of hook backwards near the tip, which is quite interesting. And the horns of males are typically a little bit thicker. In summer, though, you can see their fur has kind of this rich brown color, and then it turns to a light grey as it becomes winter. And distinct characteristics, as you can see, the white contrasting marks on the side of their head. And they also got a prominent black stripe below their eye, also a white rump. You can see that black stripe along their back going on there. In terms of their biology as well, so they typically live, female chamois will live in herds of about 15 to 30 individuals with their young, but adult males will typically be solitary for most of the year. So during the rut, typically their rut is late November, early December in Europe, but May in New Zealand. The males will engage in quite fierce battles for the attention of the unmated females. And then we'll have a look at the cute little babies as we talk about the gestation and reproduction. I don't know what's up with these guys. I think they're kind of like stuck a little bit. Let's just move these guys. Might need a bit of help. So have a look at you. Look at this cute little guy. So these little babies usually go through a gestation about 170 days, which typically a single kid is born around May to early June. Though on rare occasions, twins may be born. And if the mother is killed, other females will actually take in the responsibility and take care of the babies, so quite good parents. Typically, the young or the kid is typically weaned at about 6 months of age and is fully grown at about a year of age. However, the kids do not reach sexual maturity at about 3 to 4 years of age, as some females actually may mate as early as 2 years, but typically males will need to get big enough to compete. At sexual maturity, though, young males will be forced out by the mother's herd by the dominant males, who actually sometimes will kill them, but not too often too bad. And then they wander around until they can establish themselves as mature breeding males at about 8 to 9 years of age. So in terms of their diets, these guys eat a variety of vegetation, such as highland grasses and herbs during their summer, and conifers, barks and needles from trees in the winter, and they're primarily diurnal in activity, so they're around the day, and they often rest around midday and actually forage along during moonlit nights sometimes. So let's have a look at another one. Here's another one. Look at this female over here. So in terms of predators, in the past, their primarily predators would be things like Eurasian lynxes, Persian leopards, golden jackals, and grey wolves, but some predation potentially by golden eagles, especially for young animals, and in brown bears. But they typically, to avoid predators, they are quite speedy and are able to escape predators and jump quite high, so they can run up to about 50 kilometers an hour, or about 31 miles per hour, and jump 2 meters vertically, so about just over 6 feet, or 6 feet 7 inches, and over a distance of 6 meters or 20 feet, so they're quite good jumpers. In terms of their distribution, though, they're native to the Pyrenees in Central Europe and Turkey, and live in rocky, rugged terrains with high elevations up to about 11,000 meters. So typically it's like at least 11,000 feet, or about 3,600 meters. But in Europe, they tend to like alpine meadows above the tree line, but move to elevations about 800 meters to spend their winters in the pine-dominated forests. So in New Zealand, they've been introduced as well for hunting. They were they were actually gifted to New Zealand by Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I, who exchanged for some living ferns and rare birds and lizards. So he gave them to New Zealand government, and they were introduced into. They arrived in Wellington in 1907. There was two bucks and 6 does, and then they're kind of released into the Mount Cook region, where they've spread across most of the South Island. And because they're invasive and hurt the native flora, there's no really bans on hunting them. There's unrestricted hunting. They want you to hunt them because they damage alpine areas. But actually, there's been research that has showed that they actually tend to be 20% smaller than the European counterparts. Potentially a food issue or inbreeding or something like that. We don't know. In terms of hunting, though, they are considered tasty, and they are popular game animals. That's why they were introduced to New Zealand. And they have 2 traits typically exploited by hunters. They're most active during the morning and evening that they feed, so that's kind of the best time to look for them. And then they actually are more likely to be out as well. In terms of as well, they're also used for chamois leather that is made from the hide that is very smooth and is absorbent and favoured for cleaning and polishing. Though modern leather may still be made from their hides, but typically the hides of domestic goats and sheep and deer are used more commonly. And actually fabric used sometimes, but it's just not that common anymore. But yeah, really, really cool. Definitely love a nice chamois. Really, really awesome. So Ricky Ice, welcome to the modding scene. You did a great job. But last and certainly not least, we've got another great cakes mod. We're going to back into prehistory to have a look at this giant penguin. So this is one of the, if not the largest penguins. The title for the largest extinct penguin is kind of controversial because there's a lot that are quite similar in size. So yeah, this is Anthropornis nordigellandi, as you say that. This is the type species described in 1905. Nordigellandi. I'm going to go with that. I'll just go Anthropornis. So these guys are a species of giant penguin that lived about 45 to 33 million years ago. So it lived through the later Eocene to the early parts of the Oligocene. So between 45 and 33 million years ago. So in terms of their size, these guys reached about 8 meters, 1.8 meters, or about 5'11" at the tip, and got about 90 kilograms or 200 pounds. That there is one specimen that is quite large, that is up there with the biggest penguins, which is Nordigellandi. They could believe to reach a weight of about 108 kilograms or 238 pounds in weight, and reach about 2.05 meters or about 6 feet 9 inches. So quite a huge bird as well. And the fossils of these guys have been found around Seymour Island off the coast of Antarctica and in New Zealand. But by comparison, the largest living penguins, the emperor penguin, that's just 3'11" or just 1.2 meters long, or too tall, depending who you ask. These guys are much larger. So typically, why these guys were so big around this time is this was before whales became really common. So the penguins kind of took the opportunity to take those larger niches in the ecosystem and became a little bit bigger to chase fish. But then once whales and dolphins kind of managed to make it to the southern hemisphere, a lot of these larger species went extinct, and then we get kind of the more diversity that we get today. So they kind of took the niche of small dolphins and porpoises and things like that at the time, which is quite cool. And you can actually see the evolution as well. Very interestingly, these guys have a bench joint in their wing, which is actually a vestigial trait from their ancestors. Most modern penguins don't have that. And also you can see they've got the feathers there. They're still evolving to become much better swimmers. We do have we have a pretty good fossil record of penguins. We have a lot of different species throughout prehistory. And these guys were among the biggest, of course. The biggest, as I mentioned, is kind of hard to determine because, of course, there's so many big penguin species genera described, it's kind of hard to tell. But yeah, really, really cool. Love talking about these guys, especially around their history, since they were basically the dolphins before dolphins. But modern, they couldn't get quite as big as whales because they still have to come onto land to lay eggs and things like that, so they weren't able, and also to molt, so they couldn't have the opportunity. But they did take that niche, and they've done quite well even today. We do have quite a good fossil history, especially in New Zealand. New Zealand is kind of considered the mecca for penguins. There was all sorts of different species that evolved in New Zealand, and even most of the species today, about 13 of the 17 or so different species of penguin are found in New Zealand. So really, really cool. So yeah, a really nice mod done by Great Cakes. Really, really cool. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I Really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.